跟我学汉语. Today we're going to look at Chinese characters. A big part of learning Chinese. Chinese does not use an alphabet the way English does. It uses characters, and unfortunately we have to learn every single one. And there are a lot of characters to learn, no question about it. So what strategy do we take when we learn characters? What do we need to think about and remember? There are a couple of elements. One is the structure of the character. Another is the radical. Every character is a radical. The phonetic element. Many characters have phonetic elements, stroke order, and any other components. Start with looking at structures. You think about a character you know. Envision it in your mind. What's the structure? The structure of this character is very straightforward, side by side. Many characters are side by side, oftentimes radical on the left side and a sound element or another element on the right side. What about this character? It's a top to bottom character. Again, a lot of characters like that. There are many different structures. We're not going to look at them all now, but it may help you when you learn a character to think about the structure of the character, maybe compare it to other characters that you know. Radical, 部首. You probably know, you should know by now, how radicals came about, how many there are, etc. And you probably know a lot of radicals. There are 40 to 50 really common radicals. When you learn a new character, oftentimes it helps to either pay attention to what the radical is or go and find the radical, because usually, many times, the radical provides the meaning element to the character. So here's an example. The sun radical, very common radical. First character, 早, early or morning, time of day. 晚, late or evening, again, a time of day. 是, the verb to be, we live under the sun. And last, 春天的春, springtime, when the sun awakens the earth again. Another example, the movement radical. Again, a fairly common radical. First character there, 道, which means a path or way. Other characters, 这 and 还, not 100% sure why the radical is a movement radical, but the last one, 进, to enter, involves movement. So when you learn a character, good idea to know the radical. What about the phonetic elements? Well, we say that Chinese is not a phonetic language, but in fact, about 85% of the characters in common use today are made up of a phonetic element, a shengpang, and a radical. Phonetic elements are problematic. They're not always the same sound, and they're not reliable, and they carry no tone information with them, but it's still a good idea to pay attention to them. Here's an example. Qing, first one, qing, as in to invite, the language radical and the sound element. Next one, qing, qingtian, clear day, the sun radical and the qing sound element. Qing, emotions, the heart radical and the sound element. And qing, the water radical and the sound element, meaning clear. Another example, ma, the sound element. In this case, it means horse. Mama, mother, the woman radical plus the horse sound element. Ma, the question particle, the mouth radical and the sound element. Ma, as in how ma, number, the stone radical, the horse, the sound element. And ma, to scold, again, the mouth radical and the sound element. So it's a good idea to pay attention to sound elements because oftentimes they can help us remember the pronunciation of a word. What about stroke order? Well, stroke order is important for two reasons. One is that if you write characters in the correct stroke order, they're more likely to look good. The other reason, and perhaps more important, is that since the same elements, the same components occur over and over again in characters, if you're writing them the same way, it's easier to remember them. It's easier to remember how to write them. So here's an example of the stroke order for sure. Now, if you remember the main rules of stroke order, top to bottom, left to right, it's normally fairly easy to know the stroke order for a character. There are some exceptions and there are some other rules, but it's worth your time when you learn a character to pay attention to the stroke order. The other thing to think about is any other common elements that characters share. It may not be a sound element, it may not be a radical, but it's worth being aware of them and making that connection between characters. So have a strategy when you learn new characters.